just introduce what we're doing here. I'm going to go to the chat room, but there's 3 people participating in this opening round of a discussion that we have much to talk about today, and I only want to put an hour into this because I got to get back to being normal. This is really starting to wear on me. I don't mean that like I'm a wimp. I mean like I want to get chapter 15 published tonight, come hell or high wire. There's that high water. I feel like I'm walking on a high wire, high voltage line anyway. After we discuss what you and Pastor Clyde Holt, and he's getting a number of fans around the globe who want more. What they want is more Christian truth.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's something we could all benefit from, and I mean all people, agnostics, Wiccans, devil worshippers, Catholics, which reminds me, I have some interesting news about the Plum City Catholic Church. They're in a little bit of an uproar, and I'm politely standing on the sidelines tossing gas cans in. However, having said that, I'm very refreshed and encouraged. In fact, I'm not in the chat room yet, I don't think. Oh, yeah, I am. I don't know if Agent Bean is here, and I think not. And I don't see Agent Tillman. But I saw some encouraging communications between Bucky Bengo and Gene, and encouragement is one of the central messages in Christianity, I believe, and I'm sitting here making this stuff up as it occurs to me, but we're talking in a moment, David, you're going to talk about this letter that I signed after you wrote, and we're sending it to incoming FBI Director Comey. And we're going to ask him exactly what one sentence, and I'll leave that for you to talk about, David, what one sentence regarding women and pain and women, SOS mothers need to be carefully taught. No, they don't. Adam and Eve are the originators of intercourse, according to my Spartan knowledge. But ever since that, nature has prepared mothers for everything mothers need. And to this day, there's a lot of people that go through natural childbirth, and we don't need a bunch of radical lesbians redesigning the paradigm. Having said that, this is David Hawkins coming on soon, Field McConnell from the Plum City studios of KRAP Radio. And David, now that I've introduced Pastor Clyde to the audience and myself, why don't you take over for most of the hour, and I'll sit here in the campfire chat room and lob grenades.
Well, thank you, Field, and I really want to make this interactive because I don't want my boring voice dirging on about this stuff, and it's so important, and the interconnection with your sister and Comey and the pastor, I think, should dominate this. But let me just copy and then paste the offending paragraph into the text of the chat room, and then I'll read it. Or I'll repeat the reading because you and I and the pastor were talking just offline a little bit earlier, and then invite the chat room to look at some of these key phrases and help us interpret them. And I'd particularly like the pastor to comment from a Christian point of view what this could mean to the Christian community around the world, which is under the threat from these scumbags, because I think it might very well empower Christians to do the right thing. HSBC SOS, that's the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank Corporation, which was set up in 1865 in the United Kingdom to finance the opium trade, and the founders of that was the great-great-grandfather of David Cameron, who's now the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and his great-great-grandfather was Ewan Cameron. HSBC SOS is raising children in pedo-fem, that's my abbreviation for pedophile-feminist families, with no male role model in 132 countries around the world. Close square brackets, because that was our comment. Profession of the SOS mother. Children are central. And this is scrolling up, so I'm just trying to keep track of it because it moves out of sight. Being an SOS mother is a special profession with special duties and particular challenges. It is also a profession which, just like all others, requires a clear definition of what the job entails and what skills are needed for it. Women need to do vocational training in order to become SOS mothers. Theory alone is not enough. Every woman needs expertise in different areas to be able to carry out these duties: attitude, theoretical knowledge, and skills. What is meant by that? SOS mothers must have a particular attitude, specific approaches and values towards children as well as themselves. This includes the women being prepared to become involved in painful processes if it is in the child's interest, as well as recognizing their own limits and needs and not becoming overwhelmed. I think, Field, this is a euphemism for the women teaching the children to operate in a pedophile entrapment mode. So the kinds of folks that are flown to countries that are hosts to these SOS children's villages in aircraft rented out by your sister through the United States Justice Prisoner and Alien Transportation System can be entrapped at those villages. And then when they return, quite possibly with blood on their hands, and I mean literally and metaphorically, because the children have died in these interactions, that the SOS Children's Villages acts as a pedophile and child pornography gathering center and storing in the archives at 8 Canada Square material that can be used to extort concessions from these people for the rest of their lives. And I'm talking about your sister, her female lover, Leonora Guaria, because, and here I'm asking you to jump in, I believe, Field, that these two women quite often went to rather obscure places for their holidays, including Romania. Your comment, please, over.
Yes, they went to Romania on their last trip abroad. I say again, abroad. And David, I want to give Pastor Clyde as much time as he wants to answer any questions you may have or anybody in the chat room may have. And I'm also asking Jack Mack or Craig's here. Hey, Craig, would you find the image that I put on today's radio show? It's a bunch of space cadets in the nude. And if anybody's offended at what I publish, guess what? So am I. That's why I publish it. And I just quit going to church over this. And I also quit the American Legion over this because I don't have time to go to taffy pulling, cotton candy meetings of any variety when there's children being raped and murdered in a corporate manner. And my sister has the keys to the solution. Am I putting pressure on my sister? No, I'm assuming she's innocent of all charges, and I'd like to see her exonerated in a court of law. If she's guilty, my parents would join me in saying she deserves justice. David, after you ask Pastor Clyde Holt a question or two, I want to cover some other headlines that are in Chapter 15. The sex scandal at number 10 Downing. That's in yesterday's news. Number 10 Downing is, Pastor Clyde knows what it is. Some people may not know that's the equivalent of the White House, where David Cameron has a relationship with an Irish guy named George Osborne that looks a lot to me as the relationship between Humpty Dumpty's garage boy and Stephen Harper. And if you think I'm talking in confusing mannerisms, let me be real brief. I don't know what Nigel's last name is. Perhaps it's right. There's a little triad between Humpty Dumpty, Stephen Harper, and Nigel Wright. But you know me, I never want to cast aspersions upon the stellar quality and reputations of any of these gay politicians. So I'm never going to mention Nigel Wright. But if I mention the word Nigel Glasscock, you'll know I'm talking about Nigel Wright. Notice I didn't say anything about Mary Elizabeth Harriman, or the judge who says we can't say Mary Elizabeth Harriman, whose name is Judge Jennifer McKinnon. And if these people don't think they're going to see justice, they're simply wrong. They have their heads up and locked. Let me get to weekend news. Bill Maloney, who does Pie and Mash Films over in England, was giving an on-the-street interview about the rampant paranoia that's being covered up by David Cameron's number 10 Downing Street. And at the end of the 7-minute interview, roughly, somebody will probably, thank you, I see somebody put up the naked dancers. By the way, in chapter 15, just to whet everyone's appetite for chapter 15, this picture of 4 males and 2 females, I assign names to these people. And when you Google the names, you will see the list of Bilderberg attendees that just came out today, to which people say, how does Abel Danger do it so fast? Well, we don't know what we're doing, therefore it doesn't take as much time at all to do it. I told you, David, and I told Pastor Clyde Holt, just to prove this is live, I'm going to let him say 2 words.
Howdy, how ya?
He said his 2 words, unscripted and live, and anything else he says today will also be from the heart, from the head, and unscripted and live. But back to the headlines, you can't keep up with this type of hilarious faux pas, whatever that means, it's French and I don't do French, by these global perverts. How about John McCain's son's wedding? Okay, Friday, what's her name, Hillary Thunderthighs, comes out of the closet and says, yes, I'm bisexual. I think she's lying to us. I don't think she's bisexual. But anyway, she's at least half a lesbian. McCain's camp decided, now what are we going to do? We've got to compete with Hillary, and she's turning herself in. I'm going to really offend. In fact, he has no idea what's coming. I want you to see the look on his face when I tell you something sickening. I just found out today, and it's in chapter 15 already, that in 2012, in the United States of America, the King James Version of the Bible was corrected to remove all negative comments about homosexuality. On the cover of this Bible, I'm making none of this up. It's all unscripted. I can't believe how much is coming in to Abel Danger in the last 12 hours. It's got a pastel cross, and these perverts, these deception artists on steroids, are calling this Bible the Queen James Version. Does that make you as sick as it makes me?
I'm not surprised though.
No, I'm not surprised either, but that goes back to David, myself, and Pastor. None of the 3 of us are homophobic. In fact, I only blew 1 driveway this year for somebody that needed to have their driveway done. It was a 1/4 mile long. It was 4 feet deep. And it was a lesbian couple whose names I don't know, and I wouldn't tell you if I did know them. All I know is they had a need. I had a snowblower. I took care of their problem, and they tried to pay me. And I said, what are neighbors for? And that means my neighbors can be gay, they can be lesbian, they can be transgender, they can be anything they want to be. And if they treat me with compassion, I treat them with compassion. And like some of the people that I used to go to church with, when they treat me with backbiting and rumors and unsubstantiated criticism, well, I don't play that game. I just said, I love you regardless of your ill-informed opinion. And I think Jesus Christ is the definition of love. And I don't mean Reggie love. Back to the headlines and over to you, David. Hang on. McCain's son, who's a ham-fisted helo pilot, married a black woman. Now, there's nothing wrong with white people marrying black people that I'm aware of. There's nothing wrong with Hillary Clinton being half a lesbian that I'm aware of. But once again, there's things in the Bible that are a little bit tighter than my opinions. But I will stand on the Word of God, which is in the Bible, and I mean the real Bible, not one that's got a pastel. You can't make this stuff up, David. These people are absolutely out of their tree. Back to claiming victory for stuff that we influenced. David, yes or no answer to this, and I promise to turn it back over to you in 30 seconds. Thanks for posting that, whoever did. I'm referring to all the stuff that's coming up right as we speak. I can't keep up with that either. David, yes or no? Are you aware that in the last 72 hours, the United States of America told the UN they would not participate in gun control? Yes or no?
Yes, you told me.
I thought I told you, but I can't even remember what I'm thinking, doing, or saying, because I'm busy about 60 hours a day now trying to get chapter 15 done for not only for Craig, it's a personal commitment to Craig, but for the rest of you guys. 2 more comments and I'll give it back to you. I think we can take partial credit for that gun control thing. And you know what? If Comey of the FBI wants to argue, he's welcome to come on our show anytime. And we'll chew him up and spit him out in about 30 seconds. And that's, if you do it, I do it a lot faster, David. Comey, HSBC, Bank, and pedo-fem SOS Children's Villages. Where do they intersect? They intersect at Kristine Marcy. Last point, Bilderbergers, June 6th. I hate to do this, but whoever posted the picture of the space cadets nude, would you put that back up? Because somebody, in fact, two somebodies, Bucky Badger and Bean Spiller, I sent them safety copies. And what I did was I noticed, and you can tell from the equipment, there's 4 males and 2 females. And I noticed the females are sort of sissies because they're not staring at the camera like the men did. Well, these midget men. Anyway, if somebody would put, yeah, that's it. Okay, underneath this picture, there's, in the big picture, there's 4 males and 2 females. And so what I did, just because Abel Danger doesn't play fair, we just play for all the marbles. I picked some of the most interesting names among the USA members attending the Bilderberger meeting on D-Day. Hey, you guys know what D-Day was? D-Day was June 6th of 44. Please correct me if I just misspoke. And D-Day is the day that James Arness was the first American, if you might know him as Matt Dillon of Gunsmoke. James Arness was the first Army guy off a landing craft on Anzio Beach or whatever beach it was, Omaha Beach, son of a beach. I don't care what the beach was. The first American to wade into Europe on the D-Day event on June 6th of 1944 was James Arness, who played in a TV show, longest running TV show ever when it quit. And the name of that was Gunsmoke. Well, Gunsmoke brings us back to Abel Danger in a roundabout sort of way. Sorry for the outburst, David. Over to you.
No problem, Field. So, well, there's a huge range of questions that I would like to fire at Pastor Clyde.
Go ahead.
The first one I would say is, to what extent does your community, Pastor Clyde, get involved in missionary work overseas?
I'd say minimum.
Go ahead, David.
Okay, that's a very concise reply. But many churches do get heavily involved in missionary work overseas, and many people of goodwill go overseas and try and help. Often they go to villages, dig wells, and basically help on education and nutrition. And my concern quite often has been, and I don't know if I've got the right word here, the worldliness of young people who go out to, let's say, a Nigerian village and try and help the local community. First of all, they're totally out of their own environment. It may be the first time that they've left their parents. And I suppose my question to you, Pastor Clyde, is to what extent you think these young people are vulnerable to entrapment and extortion when they're taken away from their parents and sent to these distant lands? Over to you.
I would say to a very great extent.
He's laconic, as am I. Hey, David, we're going to do something different. Don't laugh and only encourage me.
You eat the same water because you're both incredibly laconic, and I'm not used to that.
Well, listen, I can give you a 30-minute run-on answer to any simple question that should deserve only a yes/no. But I'm going to sit here to make him more comfortable. He is comfortable, and he is honest, and he is laconic. For instance, I'm going to ask him a yes or no question, and watch his instant answer that'll be precisely accurate. Is God real?
Yes.
There you go, David. Over to you.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, let me take a character. And again, I think I'm now ready to expect a very laconic answer. But the wife of the Prime Minister of Canada is a woman by the name of Laureen Harper. And she was at a technical college in Alberta studying photojournalism and cameras and so on and so on. After leaving university, she got married and she went to Africa on what her present husband, the Prime Minister of Canada, describes as a pilgrimage. And she visited 13 countries. She left her husband and she traveled as a single white woman through 13 countries in Africa during a period, this I think is in the mid-1980s, when, as is true today, many of those countries were involved in civil war with massive torture and rape of the local population and the hoovering up of children who had lost their parents into SOS children's villages. Now, maybe I can just ask for a comment, even if it is laconic. What do you think of the description of the Prime Minister of Canada of his wife's journey in Africa through those 13 countries in that period, of the phrase, she went on a pilgrimage to Africa? What do you think of that? Over to you.
I would have to ask her, I guess, what a pilgrimage means. My opinion of it is this: she wasn't doing anything profitable in the Lord's work, or for the furtherance of the gospel. That's my opinion.
And David, let me chime in with my opinion.
Okay.
I'm going to correct you in a laconic fashion. You used the word twice, Stephen Harper's wife. I'm going to suggest the phrase that's more accurate, Stephen Harper's beard. And since we're live and unscripted and honest, we have nothing to be ashamed of and nothing to fear, except for falling short of whatever God has called us to do. But before meeting us, David and myself and Abel Danger, were you familiar with the term beard?
No.
Yeah, and what a beard, in case anybody else knew who doesn't know, when you got a homosexual of either original equipment, I mean, when they were originally built in the factory, they were either a female or a male. Somewhere along the wiring diagram got mixed up, I'm supposing. And if anybody wishes to correct me, please do. I'm not here to criticize things that I do not understand, for the times they are a-changing. However, I think it's important to all of us globally, regardless of our IQ, regardless of our color, our gender, our preference, our politics, our home of national origin. I think all of us need to come to grips with the fact that most of the nations are being either led by, which I would say is misled by, or they're being abused by countries that are led by beards. David Cameron and Samantha, there's some bearded activity going on there that was in the news yesterday. Watch me take a sip of water. I think Jesus is the water of life, actually. I'm not sure I'm saying that correctly, but I see a nod, so I must be close. Having said that, David, we got Stephen Harper and Lorene Harper, who are beards. We got Barry Swatero and Sasquatch, who are beards. Oh, you don't like that? Tough. Come over to 401 Main Street. Express your angst. And we got, we got the Harpers, the Soteros, the Camerons. No, we got the, well, I'm not so sure about the McCains. I just saw a very interesting picture of John McCain and his wife, what's her name, Cindy Hensley, and their son, who, once again, doesn't bother me who marries what, but I think it's a political stunt, this wedding. Having said that, David, let's get back to your asking Christian questions, or even whatever that word is for, non-secular questions, Pastor Clyde.
Field, so let me just speculate about what Lorene Harper was doing. Her name wasn't Harper back then, when she went on this pilgrimage to 13 countries in Africa as a lone white woman with a background in photojournalism. I think she was exposed to, and perhaps a party of, pedophile torture and rape of children in the various SOS children's villages that were strung out across that journey and that pilgrimage. And she came back to Canada and ultimately, how shall I put it, perhaps stalked is the right word, the future Prime Minister of Canada, who apparently was a backroom boy. I don't mean anything read into that more than I should, who was a nerd, an economist, working in and out of the University of Calgary with a guy called Tom Flanagan. But prior to that, he was a systems integrator with Imperial Oil. So of all the world leaders, or all the national state leaders, he's probably the most sophisticated user of computers. And her career, starting in 1989, she obtained finance to start a company in Calgary, in Alberta, in computer graphics. And she worked in this company that she ultimately owned and ran it to 2004. And it was receiving substantial funds from an unknown source, so much so that she was able to finance the political career of her husband, Stephen Harper, and ultimately place him as the Prime Minister of Canada, and incidentally the most sophisticated users of advanced computing techniques. So we have a problem, because this is supposedly a Christian country, or its origins are Christian. They have a marriage, they have 2 children, and he is the Prime Minister of Canada during a period when some very unpleasant things have happened, including the Luca Magnotta alleged murder of a victim at a university in Quebec, the dismembering of the body, taking off a hand and a foot and a hand and a foot and the head, filming that process and sending the body bits through the Canada Post Mail to the head of the Liberal Party of Canada, the head of the Conservative Party of Canada, which is Stephen Harper, and to 2 schools in British Columbia. One school being St. George's Junior School, where a friend of Justin Trudeau worked and has been convicted as a pedophile teacher.
Hey, David.
Yes.
We'll get back to Luca Magnotta, the teacher, and your thread, because you're giving him a run-on question. But during your run-on question, I use my ADHD skills. That stands for Abel Danger, Heavy Duty. Because you made the comment, and I'm just enjoying this because we are the source, it seems. You made the comment, correct me if I misspeak, didn't you say he was the most computer literate of the heads of state? Yes or no?
Yes.
And I wanted to jump in then and tell you it's now been 6 months since I published something that was aimed directly at Stephen Harper's computer literacy. And I'm going to post it in the chat room, but it was called Abel Danger, Chicago's Candyman, and Her Short for Snuff Swaps, dated 13 December 2012. And I got this. I think that Agent Sherlock should sit down because you're going to fall down laughing otherwise. These are the search terms that led me to exactly what I sent through a backdoor to Stephen Harper, perish the thought. The Google search terms, in fact, let's all Google it together. F as in field, F-35 plus Glamour Boy plus Chips plus Pastel plus IOC. And you're going to get 2 hits, 1, 2, 3 hits. Once again, it's like nobody in the world knows what the relationship is between the F-35 Lightning II, Stephen Harper, Glamour Boy, Agent Chips, Pastel. Oh, like that. Pastel Bible. Ooh, it's like suddenly it's blessed to be a homosexual. And then IOC. And I can't tell him what an IOC is because he may not be aware of the items of clothing that are popular with young ladies today. And I'm painfully aware of it because as an airline pilot, walking through Miami and San Diego, all you saw were the stupid stringy things well above the hip line of the blue jeans of American young ladies. Gag me with a spoon. Sorry, David, go on back to Luca Magnotta here, but I just want to say, I'll post these links in the chat room so everybody can see how our information is really cornering the market, if you will. David, sorry for the interruption. Here's Pastor Clyde.
Yeah, thank you, Pastor Clyde, and Field. And of course, I know I'm as tempted as Field to do the run-on thing. And of course, it's hard to work in a question when you're running on. But let me just back up to this arrangement with the two elementary schools. Well, one is a junior school, St. George's Junior School, which is up in the area of the University of British Columbia, and the Falls Creek Elementary School, near where my first wife used to live. Now, I'm just going to speculate and ask for comment. I believe that both of those schools, where, let's say, the vast majority of parents and teachers are doing the right thing, are targets for this idea of pedophile entrapment and pedophile extortion. And so the one that received the hand and the one that received the foot, that could have been a signal from the people who control Harper not to investigate the child pornographers in British Columbia and Vancouver. Now, just going back to, and I'm just going to pick up this business about the all SOS mothers, and then I'm going to drop that in the chat room and then ask for your comment, Pastor Clyde. Just excuse me a minute while I do that. Here it goes into the chat room. And it's a more detailed definition of what SOS mothers are supposed to do. Now remember, this outfit is in 132 countries around the world. It's the biggest non-government child charity in the world. It's been going since 1947. To all intents and purposes, it was founded in New York by Morris Strong, who would have been 20 at the time, and he became a junior pass officer and working very closely with the Rockefellers. I think Morris Strong, who's hanging out in China right now, is a pedophile pimp, and he was instrumental, and of course he's significantly older than your sister, Phil, in working with your sister in developing SOS Children's Villages as a pedophile entrapment and extortion organization that now controls many world leaders around the world. So let me just ask Pastor Clyde's reaction to this. All SOS mothers must prepare for their tasks through a theoretical basic training course lasting at least 3 months and follow continuous further training afterwards. Topics covered during initial training include, but are not limited to, forms of violence in families, neglect, sexuality, sex education, birth control, sexual abuse, and the process of growing independent. So I don't know what the embedded question in that, Pastor Clyde, is, but what would be your reaction to children of a civil war being passed into the care of mothers and aunties that specialize in that kind of technique of grooming? Over to you.
And David, before he answers, the more important part is you said mothers and aunties, but what you didn't say was no male role models. So I'll give it back to Pastor. Sorry about that.
Well, first of all, this idea or this fact of the SOS mothers is brand new to me. And so I'm a little bit out of the loop, trying to absorb it all. But the other thing that occurred to me when you were talking there was that, you were talking about these mothers being themselves apparently trained and then passing that on to the children in their care, talking about sexual abuse and that kind of thing. Are you saying that the mothers are exercising sexual abuse on these girls?
Yes, I am.
That's pretty shocking to me. I guess to back up a little bit, you were talking about this lady that went on a pilgrimage in 13 countries. In view of what I've been hearing here, I'm very interested in the fact that that she was a trained photographer. And it sounds to me like she was using the photographer aspect of it in her so-called pilgrimage.
David, let me jump in because what he just said, I'm sitting next, I don't know if I'm in the camera field of view, I say again, field of view, but I'm sitting right next to Pastor Clyde, and when I was last over at my computer looking at Campfire Chat, Agent Sherlock from Gatineau, Quebec, had asked me to ask you, David, and this goes right into what he just said, in his response to your Neanderthal question that went on forever. He's focusing on what her photography might have included during her pilgrimage. The question from Sherlock is, what, from a criminal standpoint, what is it likely that Lorraine Harper's graphics company was doing that benefited the cabal? And I think that you and your answer might be going back to 1996 and John Benet Ramsey. But before you go back, and I'll turn it over to you, I just wrote myself a note to put out an alert. Most of you don't know the name Ben Fellows, but for those of you who know that Bill Maloney highlighted Ben Fellows in a YouTube interview over the last 72 hours, it appears that Ben Fellows has now gone missing. So I put that out to the chat room to send me as much information about Ben Fellows as you can for Chapter 15. And David, you got your answer from him about Lorraine Harper's photography. Would you be so kind as to answer Sherlock's question about what it is that Lorraine Harper brought to the Kabbalist table in her graphics company? And I don't know what the real name of it was, but I can tell you this. If a single dangerette will remind me, I'm going to call it porno graphics in Chapter 15, and we'll just let the chips fall where they may. David, over to you.
Yeah, I think this is absolutely right. I see Mensa Max says her graphics company obviously altered pictures to incriminate people. We can't prove that, of course, but this was a really odd career trajectory for this woman. Apparently, when she was younger, she was a bit of a tomboy. She had to be disarmed at some rave or something by teenage males because she was waving a chainsaw around. She allegedly is having an affair with an her RCMP bodyguard, and she no longer lives at 24 Sussex Drive. All of that is hearsay, and I can't prove it. But I think it is totally interesting that she ran a graphics company, because in 1996, at this famous meeting in the Great Hall of Justice in Washington, where your sister and Janet Reno, who's a lesbian pedophile, and Jamie Gorlick showed up. There were 3 technologies that were discussed and awarded the Gore Hammer Award, and that was Sentry, JPATS, and JABS. And those technologies were followed, or at least the announcement that these women, together with various people in the FBI, were reinventing government, 2 months later, was followed by the horrific rape and torture of little John Benet Ramsey in her parents' home in Boulder, Colorado. And hell, I'm no expert, and I don't want to become an expert in this, and I don't even want to see the product, but I'm absolutely convinced, Pastor Clyde, that that little girl was filmed in her death throes, and the content of those films wound its way back through encryption systems of a kind with which Stephen Harper would be deeply familiar, and quite possibly placed on computers around the world of people who needed to be intimidated into surrender. And what do I mean by surrender? I mean the surrender to the people who back in 1996 had decided to reinvent the American government. And for them, reinventing the American government was overthrowing the government of the United States, which they deemed to be what they called a heteropatriarchy, that is, dominated by men, implied by white men, and replacing it with a pedo-fem government. That's a pedophile-feminist government, where internal controls came from images of targets who could be extorted into silence or surrender. Now, again, I apologize, I can't seem to embed a decent question in there, but let me just throw that over to you, Pastor Clyde, and ask for your comments. Oh, I have a question. Do you think it appropriate, if you have those kind of networks, and you and Field, to alert the Christian community to the possibility that SOS Children's Villages is dominated by pedophile feminists with the objective of overthrowing the sovereign state. Over to you.
Do I think it's appropriate to inform the Christian community about that? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. These things are being done in the dark, and they need to be exposed, because my feeling is that the largest percentage by far of professing Christians have no understanding or no knowledge of this at all. They just don't know what's going on.
David, let me jump in there too and agree with them 1,000%. And it goes further than that. But when someone wants to try to educate their fellow Christians about this evil in hopes of, in accordance with the biblical direction of Ephesians 5:11, have nothing to do with the unfruitful deeds of darkness, but rather expose them, that's pretty clear. And if some people in mamby-pamby churches don't like it, they're not really trying to walk into the light. They're trying to hide in the darkness themselves. And I think it gets real personal when it's your child. Let me just update you and show you how lethal and cutting edge our timing is, because in chapter 15, this link from today's radio show, if I get it from you know who, the entire link, the chat room, the video, the audio, will all be in chapter 15, which should be up sometime after midnight central tonight if I get around to writing it. I haven't started writing it yet. David, let me show you how fast we are. Somebody just, posted in the chat room an article that I'm going to read in its entirety. And the article is about Ben Fellows. And I put out a call when I last sat with Pastor Clyde. I wanted to know if anybody out there knew anything about Ben Fellows going missing. Let me read this. This is how fast our chat room works. Louise Collins has been in contact with whistleblower Ben Fellows' wife Julia regarding Ben's disappearance. Please read the following and get this out to as many people as possible. We all want Ben to return to his family safely. This is dated today at 2:59. Of course, that's London time. Anyway, at a recent UK column conference, Ben was informed by Dave Eden, a former CID detective, that his wife was in immediate danger as a result of Ben's work. It was made clear that Ben should have an exit strategy. On Thursday, the 23rd of May, after the, my words, fake attack in Woolwich, that's where some black guy trying to tell all of us in the civilized world that we would never have peace in our countries, which is bogus. David Cameron's death gasp, I suppose. Anyway, let me get back to reading this, and then I'll post. I guess this link is already in the chat room. After the fake attacks at Woolwich, approximately a half mile from Fellows' residence, Ben and his wife returned home from visiting friends to find that their apartment had been broken into. Nothing appeared to be stolen. At 11:30 that same evening, the phone rang and an anonymous man told Ben to look outside his window to the other side of the street. A man in a black ski mask stood there on a mobile phone. The caller said, "What happened to that soldier today is going to happen to you." On the 28th of May, Ben and his wife decided to leave London and to drive to a safe house. On arrival to the safe house, the couple were told that the safe house had been compromised, so Ben decided to leave on his own for fear of harm coming to his wife. He arranged to stay with a friend at the location known to Ben and his wife. However, nothing has been heard from Ben since he left on the 28th of May. This morning, the 3rd of June, Ben Fellows' wife received word from the friend whom Ben was to stay with, who alerted her that Ben had never arrived. We are now attempting to contact various resources to see if anyone has any details on Ben's location. If you have any information on Ben's whereabouts, please contact the UK column, which is United Kingdom column. It's a newspaper. It's published in Plymouth, England, which is down at the southern tip on your way to Land's End. If anybody has any information, the email address is editor@ukcolumn.org. Ben Fellows' wife, Julia, will join UK Column Live tomorrow, which is the 4th of June at 1 p.m. Keep in mind that would be London time. Here is Ben's most recent appearance on UK Column Live. Fast forward 30 minutes if you wish to miss out on the news part of the video. So, David, having said that, I'm going to rejoin Pastor Clyde and let you and him do most of the talking. But before I go back and join Pastor Clyde, I just want to say that there are some people that are not afraid of doing the right thing, of exposing evil. And some of those people are in England. That's United Kingdom Column newspaper. Editors are Mike Robinson from Northern Ireland and Brian Garish from England. He, like me, was a career military officer until he found out that the Royal Navy, in his case, was not necessarily doing what people joined the Navy to do. And that's exactly why I stepped out of the Air Force, which was actually the Air National Guard, even though I was being considered to be the squadron commander and then a general, of course, which I wouldn't have enjoyed doing at all, gag me with a spoon. But the reason I bailed out of the military when I did, and disappointing my father greatly, was because I refused to serve under William J. Clinton. And there's good reasons that I had then, and even better reasons that I had now, not to salute him, but rather to expose him. David, sorry for the run-on answer, but I think between the UK column and Abel Danger and a newspaper here called the U.S. Journal, which some people around this area and from Alice, Texas, almost slipped. There's some people in Texas who would like him to have a subscription to the U.S. Journal. And so hold me accountable. And Wednesday's show asked me right in front of him if I got him a subscription yet. There are some good news outlets. They're just not the mainstream media. David, over to you, and you and Clyde can do the rest of the show. I'll go sit by the campfire chat.
Okay, thank you, Field. So, Pastor Clyde, the challenge that Field and I face, and Field obviously can speak for himself, is I've selected a very technical approach to the analysis, which probably, when I'm talking about the science of explosives and that sort of thing, goes over a lot of people's heads. When I talk about pedophilia, I have no personal experience. I had a loving family when I was brought up, but I sense there are things going on in Vancouver that directly connect to some of my relatives, which put them under threat from a pedophile community in Vancouver. Field has taken the approach of mocking these characters, which I think is very legitimate. But I just noticed further up in the chat room, Vanny, I don't know if stormed off is the right word, but Vanny, just remind me who Vanny is, Field?
She's the leader of the Abel Danger unit in Paramus and Mahwah, New Jersey, and I'm on the phone, David, so I'll be right back with you.
Okay, well, Vanny took off because she didn't like the smut appearing in the chat room. Now, do I have any comment on that? I don't know that I have any comment. But Pastor Clyde, you see the challenge. Field chooses to mock these people, and they need mocking. I choose a very technical analysis where I'm trying to connect the dots, but it doesn't alert or excite or interest a whole bunch of people because I think a lot of the technical argument passes them by. They don't understand it and they're turned off. Do you have any advice for us from a Christian community point of view about how or what is the most appropriate method of getting this story about the possible corruption of SOS Children's Villages, the world's largest non-government organization and charity for children, is potentially a threat to humanity itself? I mean, can you give us any advice? Over to you.
Well, I think probably you're both on the right track. I think both approaches are needed. The part that you're doing, the more technical part, kind of goes over my head because I'm not a very technical person. But I think, I can say that I appreciate what you're doing. And I think that the two of you working together are being very effective.
That's very kind. I was wondering, I feel maybe on the phone at the moment.
No, I'm here.
If there's any input where we could bring in to some of these letters, and I don't know if Pastor Clyde would be comfortable with this, I'm almost suggesting 3 signatures to that letter, or do you think we should just continue as we are with the advice from Pastor Clyde? Because it's certainly appreciated. And Field filed his first lawsuit on the 1st of May of 2007, where we named his sister as a party to the movement of financial and sexual assets around the world associated with the wrongful death of nearly 3,000 Americans on 9/11, including his U.S. Naval Academy classmate, Captain Chick Burlingame. So it's now over 6 years since then, and I frequently ask myself, are we progressing? Now, people say, yes, we're progressing, but do you have any comment about how we might bring this to closure in, let's say, not the next few months, but perhaps the next few weeks? Is that possible? Over to you.
I don't think I'm well informed enough about it to make a decision on that, along that line. I'm a novice here, and I'm trying to get my head around everything that's happening, because some of these concepts are pretty new to me. But what I am discovering is that to the degree that I'm able, I'm trying to inform the people in my Christian community, the people that I communicate with in the Christian community, about the things that are discussed here, and I'm having very little success because for some reason people choose to close their eyes and ignore what's going on. I think they're doing the same thing that the citizens of Germany did when Hitler was coming to his rise. They chose to ignore it because it's uncomfortable to your lifestyle to acknowledge that there's something going on that ultimately can destroy it. You'd rather just say, well, I don't think it can ever happen here.
David, let me answer in another way. First of all, I appreciate his answer to you. You're asking him to join our efforts 6.5 years into the David and Field slaying of Goliath is sort of an unfair question, because if anybody joined us on the signature page going forward, I think they would be, by extension, implicated going backwards. So I'm making an executive decision, David, since you like me to do that. We will never have anyone, let's never ask anyone to sign on to any of our letters in the future. And if there's people who would like to, because there are some people that are up to speed with what we're doing, and some of those people have, in effect, signed on already. The 2 people that come to mind most quickly are Craig Peterson and Tim Roberts, who the world knows as Rooster Cogburn and Agent Tillman. But it's not a matter of we're trying to be glory hogs. If we get our heads chopped off and some brand new FEMA guillotines, let's not invite other people to lay their necks on the line too. I think we can do that. And I do think we're having measured success, because the silence of those people that we implicate daily, the silence is deafening. And we are on track, and the people that we pursue, they know exactly who we are. And I'm going to go on a very encouraging, positive bent now and surprise you, David. But I have a problem. I have 12 church pews. And I had a neighbor couple come out yesterday and look at these 12 church pews. And he doesn't know what's coming, but he's part of it. You don't know what's coming, do you? Yeah. Well, we decided there are a group of people that are thinking about what to do with these church pews. I have a daughter who's 19 that said it'd be a shame to burn them. I agree with that. But then I thought, from a practical standpoint, maybe somebody could use firewood. But I won't mention the surname of the couple, but there was a John who's the husband, and he has a wife who's a female. And John said he agreed with me that maybe burning varnished wood isn't a good idea from a chemical standpoint. I don't know, and I don't care. But here's the good news, David. I put this out thinking they would all laugh and point and call me nuts. I said, what do you guys think about putting these 12 pews out in an orderly fashion on the shores of Troubled Guy Lake? And then in July, when the people that travel to Plum City for the Plum City Festival, which is next month, so it's getting close, what do you think about having a sunrise service with Pastor Clyde preaching a short message about whatever he wants to preach, and it won't have any input from me or you, David. And because I want to be respectful of people that either are advanced in years and don't like to crawl out of bed at sunup, but I think I'm a fairly cunning linguist, so when I say we're going to have a sunrise service and we're going to ask you to preach at it, I want to let you know that it'll be sunrise somewhere west of here. Yeah, like about 4 time zones west. So I'm thinking maybe the sunrise service, it would have to be when Bucky Badger's here, because a lot of people are arriving on Thursday, and the first one to leave is Bucky Badger. So I'm proposing that either Friday morning or Saturday morning at around 10 o'clock, we have a sunrise service. And he can preach whatever he thinks that David Hawkins or anybody else, I know you won't be here, David, but we'll get it videotaped somehow.
I am able to get up at sunrise, but only once a week.
I was blaming it on him when actually I was thinking of the revelers, because Thursday night we're going to Vino in the Valley, which is going to get real interesting because the highways. Did you know the bridge is out?
No.
Yeah, the bridge that used to go to Vino in the Valley
Really?
has been condemned. But I found a back route. The only problem is you either have, it's a long back route or it's briefly on gravel. And so I don't mind driving on gravel. I did to get out of there the other night when I went to dinner, in the Valley. But I'm suggesting, I'll put this in the chat room, and I think we're going to go a little over an hour today, David, since I've been hogging the time inadvertently. But I think I'll talk to Pastor off camera here after the show, and we'll plan on either Friday morning at 10 or Saturday morning at 10 roughly, because I don't want people showing up for the church service with a headache, if you get my drift, for you revelers. But I do think it might be really dramatic, and I think at several occasions, and this is a question he doesn't know is coming, and it's a legitimate question. I think in the Bible somewhere, Jesus was preaching to people over water, and I think it was where he had the bread and loaves, I'm not sure. But I think it would be really enjoyable, and also it would also be pleasing to God to have the people that are coming, and the people are coming from Gatineau, Quebec, Bangor, Maine, Atlanta, Georgia, someplace near Redstone, Alabama, Phoenix, and I'm probably forgetting someone. But we also have a couple local Abel Danger people that will be coming, and I do have 12 pews, and I don't think we'll have 12 people, but you never know, because we can also invite other people that do not have any relationship to Abel Danger to come to a church service, because I think there's a lot of people that are looking for truthful leadership in a Christian environment, and because of IRS 501c3, increasingly they're not getting the bread they need to consume in organized churches. So David, I'm going to bow out, let you and Pastor Clyde do most of the talking until it's time to quit. I'm going to go over to the chat room. David, over to you.
Okay, Phil, when do you want to terminate?
Whenever you want to, David. It's up to you completely.
Shall we go to the half hour?
Sure, let's do that.
Okay. Well, I'm very intrigued and encouraged, and I'm certainly not attempting to put you on the spot, Pastor Clyde, but I'm very intrigued at the perspective of a Christian pastor bringing in a vision, or perhaps it's a two-way process where we, that is, Field and myself and our network, can help define better the enemy. And I suppose what I'm jumping to immediately is the enemy is the organization of SOS Children's Villages, which started in 1947, effectively out of New York by a Canadian who's a genocidal psychopath by the name of Maurice Strong. And it's very interesting because the most powerful individual at a political level in SOS Children's Villages today is this guy, the Governor General of Canada, who is a man by the name of David Johnston. Now, David Johnston was the chairman of the Harvard Board of Overseers, which brought Barry Spataro to Harvard in 1990, 1991. And he's a Canadian. and he's the first and only non-American to serve as the chairman of the board of overseers for Harvard University. So this is intriguing because that means the Canadian taxpayer is lined up behind David Johnston to support the kinds of subversion, sabotage, assassination, and deception of children in those pedo-fem communities around the world in 132 countries. Now, let me just be hypothetical here. If these women and the mothers and aunties and the visitors to these camps are programming children with no male role models in the area, and what do I mean by a male role model? Well, I often say to my son, you've reached an age now where I can't tell you what to do. You can, to whatever extent, you can identify various role models out there, and you can look at your father and ask yourself, what would he have done in these circumstances? And I think this is a very legitimate objective for husbands and fathers in terms of their children, because at the end of the day, children are told what's good and bad from lots of different sources. I was taught, rightly or wrongly, that men were gentlemen and women were ladies, and no one ever raised the possibility that they weren't either. So that's how I treat people. I open doors for women, even though I'm told that's sexist. I adore children. I keep a respectful distance, and what I'm very impressed by is the way children look at me and they smile, and they seem to like me and the way I treat them, and it's a joy to behold and be part of that. My horror is that there are people out there who gain the trust of children and then abuse them, and I think there's more of those people than I would have ever dreamt of. So let me just put this guy back up again. So the Governor General of Canada, let's put a little precision on this. The Governor General of Canada, when it was concluded in court after Russell Williams, Stephen Harper's pilot, had confessed to the killing of 2 women, the Governor General of Canada, David Johnston, authorized 4 men from the Trenton Air Force Base to go to Russell Williams' home. And incidentally, Russell Williams's wife was a camera loving woman by the name of Mary Elizabeth Harriman, to go to Russell Williams' house and pick up his uniform and take them to the Air Force Base and burn them. And that is the crime of spoliation of evidence, because on Russell Williams' uniform, I believe, would be the DNA of people who participated in the murder of John Bennett Ramsey in 1996. Because Russell Williams was a pilot of the VIP fleet of Canada, centered around Bombardier VIP aircraft, same or similar model to the combat support aircraft. And with Kristine Marcy, Field's sister, having got that Gore Hammer Award for JPATS in 1996, she would have been in a position to fly victims, both adult and child, in and out of Canada to places like the pig farm, or the flip side of that, on Christmas Day, using perhaps Russell Williams as a pilot, flying Canadian paroled inmates, let's say Carla Homolka, who's a great friend apparently of Mary Elizabeth Harriman, from her jail down to Boulder, Colorado, to supervise the torture, rape, and murder of John Bennett Ramsey. So let me just put this guy back up again so I can see it. The Governor General was pleased to lend his endorsement to the important charitable work that SOS Children's Villages does on behalf of orphaned and abandoned children and vulnerable families in more than 180 countries. Let me stop there. I know a number of vulnerable families, some very close to home. I think they're being targeted by these vermin, and I'm going to destroy them, and that's a personal promise. And whether it takes me to the grave, then I will never stop chasing these people and bringing them to justice. This endorsement carries with it a long tradition of support from past Canadian Governors General, including the Right Honourable Jean Sauvé, the Right Honourable Romeo Leblanc, the Right Honourable Adrian Clarkson, and the Right Honourable Michel Jean. And you might note that all of those have an element of French and they're supposed to be bilingual. And that goes back to our very early assessment of the octopus, if that's the right word, as being baffle P, bankers, anglophones, francophones, lesbians, and pedophiles. Everyone at SOS Children's Villages Canada is honoured and excited by this recent endorsement. His Excellency's decision to grant our organisation patronage is a wonderful acknowledgement and sign of support for the charitable work that we do on behalf of some of society's most vulnerable, stated Peter Dudding, SOS Canada's volunteer president and chief of the board of directors. Well, David Johnson, a patron of SOS Children's Villages, is a special investor in McDonald Detweiler of Richmond, British Columbia, which designed and built the software to steer the planes on 911. So I'm rambling on there, Field, but just break in there while I gather my thoughts and make a few comments, if you will.
Okay, but first a commercial message. If anybody comes to Plum City and they want some elderberry products, I just got another shipment yesterday. So, David, did you have a succinct or laconic question for Pastor Clyde?
Well, no, I'm having great difficulty in making them laconic, so I'll let you have a go, Field.
Well, I'm sitting here with a case of elderberry products, and that's insignificant. But I would like your knee-jerk reaction, David, to my idea of having maybe a 20 to 30-minute church service during the Plum City Festival weekend. And, of course, any of the people from Abel Danger that want to come to church, it would be at Troubled Guy Lake. We've got 12 pews, but I'd make it real informal, real honest, and you know, between now and whatever day in July, either the 19th or the 20th, we may do this, we may not. You know, Pastor Clyde could think of what he thinks the most significant piece of scripture in the entire Bible is for the finding or the reaching out to new or immature Christians. And I'm not putting scripture in his mouth, he'll do that in a moment. But two of the messages that I find the clearest and the most uplifting are John 5:24 and Acts 16:31. So as Pastor Clyde may have a brief response to that, but if he doesn't want to speak about it now, he can speak about it at Troubled Guy Lake, which is that little pond on our property. And I'll get 12 pews. Yeah, up on the hill. Yeah, we have two ponds. Yeah, they're pretty small. In fact, my daughter last night, I said, what do you think about my idea to put a fishing boat out in our pond? And she says, I don't think they make fishing boats that short. So I don't know where she gets that type of disrespectful behavior. But anyway, David, I'm going to let Pastor, well, I gave two scriptures, John 5:24 and Acts 16:31. And maybe you can think about it between now and July, and assuming that someone, well, for instance, I'm not putting words in your mouth, I'm putting words in my mouth. You know this term Christian? I don't think it's an arrival, I think it's an ongoing journey. And all of us that are pursuing that salvation, which is freely given at a great personal cost to Jesus Christ, who I just really enjoyed. Tuesday of last week, I was hanging around the Dallas airport, and I was doing some Abel Danger work on my laptop, and a guy was eavesdropping. He was leaning over to see what I was doing. He's about a 50-year-old guy from Boston. And so we had a brief chat. And as he got up to leave, as if an afterthought, he looked me right in the eye and he said, "You be me and I'll be him." As he stood up to leave, he looked at me right in the eye and said, "By the way, do you go to church?" And I said, "Yes, I do go to church." And he says, "Which church?" And I says, "The only true church." And he goes like that. And he says, "The only true church." Well, he says, "I'm not familiar with that. Why don't you tell me what it is?" And I said, "It's Jesus Christ and his body of believers." And this guy said, "Well, you're close." And I said, "Oh, really? I'm close?" I said, "How would you improve on what I just said?" He says, "Actually, it's the Church of Latter-day Saints." And I said, "You mean like Mormons?" And he said, "Yes, that's the true church." And I said, "Okay, true church breath." I said, "What do you know about Mitt Romney's $75 million made from Stericycle?" And he sat there with a dumb look on his face, which came very easy for him. And he admitted he had never heard of Stericycle, and he had no idea about the relationship of Mitt Romney and $75 million in Stericycle. And I said, before you go around the world trying to draw ignorant people into your cult, I said, you owe it to ignorant people to find out about Mitt Romney, Stericycle, and the relationship of that corporation, which takes aborted fetuses and incinerates them. I said,
Is that Stericycle?
Stericycle, yes. Yeah, and Romney got $75 million from that. And if I misspeak, I'd love to hear from Mitt Romney, who, by the way, attended to the wedding over the weekend at the Fairmont Hotel of John McCain's son. He's a ham-fisted helo pilot. But anyway, this Mormon was somewhat offended that when he corrects me, because I want to die right in front of the camera, if I don't truly believe that I gave him the right answer, that there's only one church. And that's a question for all of us to ponder. But I'm going to assume that there is one church. It's the Church of Jesus Christ, his body of believers. And I would love to have had a microphone inside the brain of that Mormon as he wandered off to get on his Boston flight when he was told by someone representing Jesus Christ that it's not really cool to burn up fetuses that should be out there enjoying life. And Pastor Clyde Holt told me about 6 weeks ago that actually the 50 million Americans that have been aborted since 1973 in the Roe v. Wade, by the way, the woman who inspired Roe v. Wade, the woman who got the abortion, she's now a born-again Christian and vocal anti-abortion spokesperson. Okay, that's quite a run-on statement. Sorry for that, but I don't like Mormons trying to tell me that their truth is more accurate than the truth. And so I guess that guy felt like he'd had a telephone pole rammed someplace when he waddled off. So do you think that you can come up with a 15 or 20 minute message for July and then deliver it at the lake?
Sure.
Good. And I also noticed in the campfire chat room, and I'm going to go back there now because David would have caught his breath and he and Clyde can do the remaining 16 minutes. But I think it was Agent Sherlock who made a favorable comment about Pastor Clyde's cowboy hat. So I think that I think your punishment for making that statement is I will make sure that you and Pastor Clyde are seated side by side at the Vino in the Valley dinner, which is going to occur at 6 p.m. on Thursday, the 18th of July. And I'm guessing at this present time that we'll have about 20 people at the table. And
I have other hats. I can lend you my hat.
You have another hat?
Yeah, I have other hats. I can lend you one.
Well, this is a woman. Okay, Sherlock. He's going to bring a hat to you to wear, and all you have to do, what size is your hat? Or what size are your hats?
7 1/8.
Okay, his size is 7 1/8, and I don't know if in Canada you use the same size, but you can look forward to having a hat on your head at dinner, which you can remove during the opening prayer and the closing prayer, and he'll do one, and maybe somebody else will do the other one, and maybe somebody like Bucky Badger. I don't know if he would want to do that or not. He will certainly be afforded the opportunity to. And I also want to say, while I'm on the subject of Bucky Badger, that his big brother is riding his Harley up here with his Patriot Guard gear. And so Bingo, which is Bucky Badger, is 6'3", and his big brother, I think, is 6'6". And I'm going to try to get them not to smile and wear security shirts, because it's always scarier when big guys don't smile. Okay, you smile along to David. I'm going to go in the chat room. David, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Phil and Pastor Clyde. So let me just, we've got about 14 minutes to ruminate on the possibility that the legend for Barry Spataro was created from within the SOS Children's Village community, with the Mothers and Aunties representing the pedo-femmes, the pedophile-feminists, and the idea that they could take a child who had been groomed for the purposes of pedophile entrapment and create a background that would be sufficiently persuasive for the American voters and put him in the White House, where incidentally he's created the Office of Women and Girls as opposed to the Office of Women and Children, which is run through Valerie Jarrett, who's the former chairman of the Chicago Stock Exchange. So if that were true, then the principles behind SOS Children's Villages, which I believe would be Morris Strong dating back to 1947, and Kristine Marcy probably focusing on that initiative in 1979 when she launched the Senior Executive Service. The idea would be that they would have to create some SOS Children Villages community in Illinois in order to prepare the public through a process of pedophile entrapment and extortion. Am I still on, Phil? Because Skype just made a funny noise. Over to you.
Yeah, you're still on. You're just imagining things. He's going to nod his head because I'm the director. Actually, just so the live streamers gets, I said I was the director like this. I'm not the director of anything. But I'll tell you what, I am sort of the director of what's going to happen for 4 days in Plum City. And it's with some relief and yet some melancholy feelings that I announced, I think 2 weeks ago. No, maybe it was a week ago. But in 1 week, I dropped out of both the American Legion for cause and the church I was attending for cause. And in both cases, they're upgrades because my schedule is a little freer and my focus is a little clearer. And I'm going to go a different direction now regarding the American Legion because I'm not a quitter. In other words, if I sign up for something, I may change my effort, but I won't change my commitment. And as far as the American Legion, I'm either going to join the Legion in Phoenix that has Pat Tillman's name on it, or I'm going to join the American Legion in Canton, Texas, if there is one, and that's where my F4's parked. So David, you're live, and you and Clyde take it away.
Okay, so SOS Children's Village Chicago opened in central Chicago on Thursday, the 26th of August 2004. I'm very confident that these people had decided they were going to take the junior senator from Illinois, or junior senator in the Illinois Senate, or whatever. I'm not quite sure of the particular terms in his background, but they decided that they needed to create a legend and a perception that this guy was an acceptable candidate to run in the presidential elections of 2008. So what was the site of an old mattress factory is now the home of almost 100 children. Chicago Mayor Richard M. Daley and Alderman Latasha Thomas of the 17th Ward joined local leaders at the grand opening on the city's south side. The village consists of 12 family homes and 4 duplexes which house children and SOS parents. The village can house up to 90 children. My guess is that the children, wherever they were sourced, if that's the right word, were totally isolated from decent male role models. And they started to be groomed by the pedophile feminist women for the purposes of entrapment. Now, just across the block, I imagine, from the site of this old mattress factory, well, I don't know if it's that close, there would be Hull House, which was set up in Chicago in 1889 after Jane Addams and her lesbian girlfriend, Ellen Starr, returned from their August 1888 stay at Toynbee Hall in Whitechapel. And August 1888 preceded the outbreak of prostitutes being killed in Whitechapel, and there were 5 canonical murders involving the evisceration of these women. So fast forward to 2004, that was 4 years after a series of murders at the Picton Pig Farm in British Columbia. Those murders took place from 1996 to 2001, when Willie Picton was arrested. When crime scene investigators reached the crime scene, they found various components of human bodies, including a severed head that looked like it had been attacked by a chainsaw, in the fridge. And at the farm, they had parties with up to 1,700 people showing up from out of town, including a great number, apparently, of women in denims and leather gear. So my guess is that Field's sister, Kristine Marcy, was using the joint automated booking system to move paroled inmates out of the Bureau of Prisons who were lesbian pedophiles and flying them into Port Coquitlam or the nearest small airport, or maybe Vancouver, or maybe out at Abbotsford, to attend those ceremonies and help them go more smoothly. In parallel with that, my allegation would be she would be inviting lawyers, industrialists and bankers out to the pig farm through her proxy, Linda Picton. And the same objectives would prevail. The objective was to get the film of the torture of these women, who were probably trying to blow the whistle on the pedophile-feminists in British Columbia, in the same way that the prostitutes in Whitechapel in 1888 were trying to blow the whistle on the pedophile feminists in London. And it's the same technique. So it's very possible this idea, and remember, SOS Children's Villages was formed in 1947 by Maurice Strong, that the cousin of Maurice Strong, Anna Louise Strong, who was a great friend of Mao Zedong, used to stay at Hull House in Chicago with her presumed lesbian pedophile friend, Jane Addams. And Jane Addams and Anna Louise Strong became scriptwriters for the MGM, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer story about the Potemkin villages in Russia. And I see it's 12:24, but I've got an interesting link there, because if Hull House was entertaining Anna Louise Strong during the period she was a scriptwriter in the Second World War for MGM, there was another scriptwriter during the 9/11 attack that was a special investor with David Johnston in McDonnell Detweiler Field. And let me put you on the spot. Who was the probable MGM scriptwriter on 9/11 who was interviewed on Fox News?
Okay, you're asking me who is the probable scriptwriter for 9/11 who was interviewed on Fox News?
More specifically for Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer.
I don't have a clue. How's that for an honest answer? But if you give me a little bitty clue, I'll probably come up with the right answer if you think I know it.
Okay, he find the probable suspects 14 minutes after the first impact on the North Tower.
Are you talking about Alexander Haig?
I am.
Well, let me just go off on that tangent in a non-laconic fashion. Alexander Haig, whatever his name is, he was a draft dodger just like Jimmy Carter, and their draft dodging was rather difficult to identify. In 1943, they both entered the service academies. Haig entered West Point, and Jimmy Carter entered the Naval Academy. Now, you might say that, boy, they're just being patriotic like Field was. No, you could say the same of me, that I'm saying of them. I went to the Naval Academy in 1967, and I turned 18 in 1967. So someone could say that I was draft dodging to go to Annapolis. If anybody's ever met me or read a single paragraph of what I write, they'll know that I was not a draft dodger, although I know some people named McConnell who were. Bruce McConnell, who is the son of Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General John McConnell, I think that's his name, John P. McConnell. He was not much of a military guy. He was on the other team. Just like my sister's beard, Eric Marcy, that whole family's on the other team. But when these people that don't have a whole lot of gray matter pop up and answer questions before anybody has a chance to answer, in your example, David, Alexander Haig, within 14 minutes, was saying, gee, looking at these aircraft crashing into the World Trade Center, this looks like the work of Al-Qaeda or Osama bin Laden. Let's back up to 1972 and the Berlin Olympics. That Canadian pervert, and I don't mean in a homosexual way, Peter Jennings, and when I say he's a perverter of justice is what I mean. In 1972, he was handed a script to read on the air. I wish I had something like that. He picked up the script and he said, oh, and this just in from Berlin. The Israeli Olympic team has facility or their dormitory is under attack, and it looks like the work of the Red Brigade. Well, are these people reporting the news or making up the news? In the case of Alexander Haig, he's making stuff up because he was an insider. He was a special, that's not the proper word, but he was an investor at the Picton Pig Farm pork file. What was that thing called? They had a barbecue where they were taking prostitutes, barbecuing them. Then they were videotaping people performing cannibalistic acts, even though the people didn't know they were cannibalizing, but they were. And they're naive people like Stephen Harper in Canada and Barry Swatero, wherever he's from, and David Cameron that think that God is going to wait forever, and he's not. God's going to be in control forever, and he is. So I guess I answered your question for you, David. It's Alexander Haig, and keep in mind this is the same Alexander Haig that when somebody named John Hinckley perhaps took a couple of pot shots at Ronald Reagan, he says, don't worry, I'm in charge here. Apparently Alexander Haig wasn't aware that the vice president comes right behind the president, and then there's the Speaker of the House and the blah, blah, blah. And the one that was really scary was for a brief period there we had Hillary Clinton as a Secretary of State, so if she could have wiped out about 3 or 4 people, she would have been the president. Now that was enough to make even Merle haggard. David, I answered your question, didn't I?
Yeah, absolutely, Phil, and I think this is very encouraging. It's 12:29, but I believe now that SOS Children's Villages, it could be anthropomorphized as the devil or Satan, whether that's a useful process, but I think Christians, and I'm not being patronizing here, I think this is an immensely complex task. As what's his name, Edgar Hoover said, the citizen is confronted with a conspiracy so monstrous that they cannot believe it exists. But I think SOS Children's Villages is sufficiently well defined with a history and the de facto custody of exceedingly vulnerable children by women where there are no male role models allowed that many Christians could be persuaded to wake up to this threat. It's in 132 countries. So I think I'm going to take the liberty of focusing on the role of SOS Children's Villages in the murders and of course that significantly before, that link the Whitechapel killings attributed to Jack the Ripper to the Picton pig farm killings from 1996 to 2001 and Little John Benet Ramsey, and offer that to the pastor if he can help us communicate that to the wide Christian flock. Over to you, Field, and Pastor Clyde. Thank you very much.
Well, okay, you just put a lot of pressure on Pastor Clyde. That's why I'm going to jump in here, and I'm going to ask Mensa to get ready to put up the big red button. But he already answered what you just suggested, David, and that is when he's attempted to help Christians consider the possibility that there really are some monsters out there. And I've had the same lack of success, but I don't think we need to reach out and try to change our method. It's called changing horses midstream. I think what we're doing is being very effective because never ever have either you nor I nor any other well-informed volunteer at Abel Danger suggested we're trying to educate the masses. Yes, in fact, we'd love to educate the masses, but what our core focus has always been is to communicate the truth, first and foremost, to the perpetrators themselves, so they will be aware that we're communicating with the authorities. Now, these authorities are not doing their jobs, but that's simply because most people who are aware that the authorities don't do their jobs still live in a fairyland where they think that the United States government, the elected officials, have the best interest of the Republic of the United States of America, the Constitution, or our citizens at heart. And if that were true, then why is it in 1996 that the Social Security Trust became under the control of the Queen of England? And why is it that the IRS has their headquarters outside the continental United States? The truth is coming down the railroad tracks. And David, by your sticking your hand on the throttle and shoving it forward, it's not going to make the train go any faster because the engine is dead and it's gravity, and God controls the gravity. And if he wants to slow the train down, he can have a tree fall over it. If it's a giant redwood or a sequoia or any of those other things, the train will stop. Otherwise, the train of truth is proceeding exactly at the rate and the speed that God has intended. And if God intends that our efforts will help bring the guilty parties to justice, well, then maybe we'll get partial credit. But he doesn't need our help, although I can speak for him and say that he appears to genuinely appreciate our help. And we can all agree that the people that are floundering there in the dark, Stephen Harper, Barry Slotero, Hillary Thunderthighs, Sasquatch, my sister, John McCain, these people do not have a rebuttal or a libel charge against us. So I'd say that our efforts to educate the perpetrators, the intelligence community, and the law enforcement is succeeding. And the big red button's up, David, so I got to get over here and turn it off when I see 3, 2, 1, push. So there's the 3, 2, 1. And as soon as he tells me to push the big red button, I will do it. And I want to make sure that I have the camera on it so everybody can see that I pushed the big red button the moment that I see that he says push it. And he hasn't said it yet. Mensa, I am very deep too. Oh, there's something deep. Okay, somebody corrected me about the Social Security Trust. And he says it's not true. Oh, that's okay. Mensa, 3, 2, 1, but I don't see a push it. And while I'm waiting for the push it, if someone wants to communicate with me about why the Social Security statement is false and why the IRS is outside the continental United States, I would just say prove it with a link. And my email address is fieldmcc@yahoo.com. And oops, I see the push it now, but now I can't see the red button. So I got to go find the red button so that everybody can see that I do, in fact, push it on the count of 3. 3, 2, 1, push.